and he's going to become a shark for sure.
Duffy needs to play some big moves and get a big win in to take it into Armageddon, and we're off. It's the Sicilian. That is at least good news, not only for chess fans, but also for Fedosseev. That means that he will get some play in. It will probably be a complicated middle game. And just as I say that, Robert, it's the Rossolimo by Jan.
Smart choice from Jan Nepomniachtchi, because instead of allowing this to venture into those tactical waters of a dragon where there are exchange sacrifices and checkmating ideas, look at this position thus far. No pawn tension. He hasn't actually pushed his pawn to d4, and Fedosseev says, you are not going to do that. I have this central clamp. So I would say both sides should be relatively happy because, as David said, Fedosseev wants a long game. He proved yesterday that against Magnus Carlsen, he can win in 100-plus move battles. But for Jan Nepomniachtchi, he doesn't have to worry about his king being checkmated. So I would say pluses for both. David, I know you have experience in these quiet type positions. Who do you think is happier about the opening stage?
I think Jan objectively will be thinking that white has an advantage. After all, white has castled the king, white's pieces, the knights, the light square bishop, they're out in the center. We always say that control the midfield, control the center of the board, and you're going to be in good stead for the middle game. He controls this nice square that you're highlighting there, Robert. Big outpost on a light square in the middle of the board. So kind of taking the emotion out, taking the earlier result out, I think Jan is happy, but Fedosseev cannot complain. He's got all of the pieces, all 32 pieces still on this board right now. He's expanding, gaining space on the queen side. He's got some advantages of his own, and more importantly, the game is alive. It's totally fresh. I can guarantee neither player studied this position before, despite Jan Nepomniachtchi's speed. But for black, okay, a big hit on that queen. He needs to react. He's played very quickly up to this point, but taking that knight in the center does look fraught with danger. And he might just have to go for it. He might have to kind of leave the king in the center. No, he moves his queen instead. Yeah, I was trying to talk purely about how the players are feeling, but now it's suddenly become critical already. Some real calculation to be done.
Tanya, I'm wondering, I was going to ask you, are we going to see G takes F6 here?
I'd love to. I think the fans would love to see that happen. The commentators would love it. And the fact that Fedosseev wrote that, the fact that he hasn't picked up that knight instantly, we might be seeing that appear on the board. And that would mean it would be an absolute wild position. Black destroying the pawn structure on the king side for the open G line. The more he thinks, he's reaching out for his mouse right now. Will he play it safe, capture it with the queen? Or will we see a G takes F6? He goes for the queen, takes knight. Oh, I'm disappointed, Robert.
Well, I think it's the best move objectively. He probably wanted to play G takes F6. Like in my heart, I want to go all out for the attack, but it was strategically very unsound. So he is choosing the correct continuation. His position is much worse. As David highlighted, white is castled, controls the center, has more pieces developed, and black has just been shuffling around with the queen. So this is a clear advantage now for Jan Nepomniachtchi. His latest move, A4, somehow, it wasn't best, and, well, Fedosseev, he's not responding with the most accurate moves. That's the nature of the game when you have to win or you're eliminated. You get into this state of mind where the best move may get close to a draw. So let's play a move that's speculative, but at least forces my opponent to calculate. And I think that both players are handling the match situation well.
I love that moment where you both kind of in sync suggested G takes F6. I mean, it wouldn't even be on my radar, but that's the type of move, that unexpected option, often kind of going against conventional wisdom. You need to just throw out there, confuse your opponent a bit. I think Fedosseev feared if he played an ugly move like that one earlier, that if he lost, people would have been, mocking, oh, do you not understand chess? Do you not understand double pawns are bad? So he's played what should be correct, but look at this, the evaluation bar now rising in white's favor because he's profited. He's used his kind of development advantage to open up the center. When you're ahead, when you control more central squares, if things explode, open up, you're in a better position to kind of utilize. And look at this, knight jumping into F5 now. That's the blue arrow highlighted by the computer saying it's by far the best move. I'm also going to jump out and say it's one of the most natural moves. A knight and F5, black's king might not survive, question mark there. White's pawn will throw itself forward to F4 in the near future as well. Oof, I really fear. Look at that black light square bishop undeveloped. The black dark square bishop is a target for the marauding pawns. Tanya, I know you're a great attacker. You must be salivating at the prospect here of throwing those pieces forward.
I'm flattered that you say that, David, but I have to agree. I mean, just look at White's position. And yes, visually it looks amazing, but even you can just see exactly why it is. Black's pawn structure worse than White. Compare each of White's pieces to Black's pieces. That bishop on d5, an absolute monster. Once that knight lands on f5, that's not a knight anymore. That's a stallion right there. Black will have to find ways to neutralize that. Maybe a move like knight e7 might help, but it means more waste of time, which would give White the time to actually go in with the idea of the pawn avalanche that you were earlier talking about. F4, e5 coming in, the bishop eventually landing onto d4. I just feel like White's playing everywhere. Doesn't rush in with knight f5, first putting pressure onto c6, and it might not be the most accurate move, but I think it's also a practical approach, and it just keeps all the trumps in White's position. Meanwhile, Black doesn't trade on d4, not allowing bishop d4, which would have hit the queen on f6, but falls back with the knight. Are we expecting the bishop to retreat, Robert, or will he just keep it there?
I would be tempted to retreat, make a move like bishop back to b3, but then I see that the black bishop can finally develop and poke at the white center. Somehow things are getting a little bit out of hand for Jan Nepomniachtchi. The engine suggests that he's better here, that he hasn't spoiled his position, but it's getting complicated. It was locked up, and now it's open, and there's a bishop staring at the white king. This queen on f6 is staring through the knight at this loose pawn on b2, and even if objectively you can give up this pawn on b2, it gets scary when black has this passer not too far away from it. So I'm looking at this position with a fresh set of eyes. David, I think Fedoseev, he feels locked in and like he suddenly has chances because he's well ahead in the clock and the position is becoming a mixed bag.
Chess is all about momentum. Now he jumps into f5 with his knight, but was it a move too late? Now this, I'm trying to work it out. I don't think it's quite a pawn sacrifice, but it is a big committal decision. That's the thing. Jan, his position was too nice in a way with white. He didn't want to do anything. He didn't want to spoil anything. He just moved his rook to c1. What could be more natural? An open file. But sometimes, yeah, if you take your finger off the button for a second or two, the momentum switches. And I think he's trying to recorrect the course of this game by throwing his knight in. Maybe we jump in here, Robert, and show the idea behind this knight jump. If black takes twice on that square, eliminates the white knight, and then tries to snap up a pawn.
Okay, well, yeah, this looks pretty good for black, but there are two problems. One, bishop takes f7 check. It allows the white queen to hit a loose piece on d6. Loose pieces drop off, and that bishop will fall. But there's also bishop aiming in the other direction because this rook is trapped thanks to both of these bishops from the white side. So it's funny how I was first staring at the king side, then I saw the evaluation was so high, there must have been something better, and it's that this rook is trapped, no safe squares available to it, and thus white wins material. What a position this is, and I do not believe that Fedoseev is going to fall for this, because as we mentioned, even bishop takes f7 check. Instead, looks very good to my eyes, but after the trade of knights on f5, if we get this position, it's up to Vladimir to find some useful looking move. Bishop a7. That will trap the rook if you're not careful. That actually is a threat on the board. And so Vladimir, now he has his work cut out for him after the swap of knights.
Big moment, and he solves the problem of that threat by offering a trade of light square bishops. And here we go. Those bishops have left the board. It does look like white has an advantage, but let's zoom out of this one temporarily. We also have another game going in the losers quarterfinals. And here we see actually almost symmetry in terms of the evaluation bars. The first thing I looked over at, it looks like Firouzja has an advantage, but it's a different type of advantage to Nepomniachtchi's. The board we see on the right there, Firouzja against Martinez, very, very blocked. White has more space, hence the advantage, but still a lot to play for. What do you make of this, Tanya? The body language, the clock times, the kind of first glance at the position?
I think it's really interesting that white's the one with double pawns, but in this particular case, the double pawns actually give white an edge, a chance, because it opens up the a file and creates a target for white on that a5 pawn. White's got these long-term ideas of perhaps even doubling up on the a file, but at least for now, it's making sure that black's rook on a8 is tied down. And I think whenever black pushes that a pawn to a4, white can actually just keep the double pawns as they are. You can just think about moving your b pawn to b4, taking away that c5 square, tying down that b5 pawn, and one of black's pieces will have to defend that pawn for a really long time. You pointed out the space, and David added to that the attack on the a file. I think that explains why white's the one who's pushing in this position.
I like everything you said.
Yeah, it feels like there's a
David,
big
go
hole,
ahead.
Robert. Sorry, I'm zoned in on the c6 square. We need to highlight that one. It looks like a dream outpost for any of white's pieces.
But the problem is a knight can't get there very easily because the pawns cover the entry points, but a rook can. But Alireza Fruja says, Tanya, your idea, it's pretty good. Let me go ahead and double the rook. So I actually think that black may have to play this move a4, even if you don't want to, because you end up freezing your own pawn structure. You're going to lose the a pawn otherwise. So a4, to my eyes, looks reasonable. Another move is rook c8. There's an open file. You should put your rook on it. And the big question that I have, David, is that if this a pawn is in fact lost, and I actually don't see an easy way to keep it defended, because even after a4, rook a1 comes to mind, does black have drawing chances to equalize by playing around it, playing for activity?
Want to say yes for Jose Martinez's sake, but I think dropping a pawn here, unless something really magical happens, unless he somehow gets the black bishop into the game, the black knight on d7 into the game, it's going to be a real struggle. To seek compensation, you always need active pieces. And maybe that black bishop comes in now. That's one way to defend that a pawn. It's a bit of a journey, a bit of a path around. It takes 3 moves essentially to reactivate itself. But in a block position, maybe you do have that luxury. It definitely feels like his back's against the wall. And Martinez, he's great at kind of finding resources when it looks like things are going against him. But yeah, I do fear, just with the simplicity of white's moves, the simplicity of white's plans that Tanya pointed out, that even if he finds some compensation, it's going to take him a bunch of time on the clock. And already we see him a minute down, maybe soon a pawn down. Yeah, I would take Firouzja here all day long.
The more I look at this position, the more I see the strength in these double pawns. Right now, he doesn't go for the idea of bishop b7, bishop d8, and I think that's a really great defensive resource you spotted, David. He's going for the activity, and that is classic Jose Martinez. He doesn't believe in passive defense. He's always trying for a way where he can keep his pieces active, even if it comes at the cost of material. Now, the problem here is that even if black was to step up, firstly, you can't go queen to c7 because that queen needs to stay connected to the b5 pawn as well. I actually don't see a way for the pawn to stay alive on a5. Which means you're going to go down a pawn. And now I'm just wondering, where is this activity that Jose is looking for? He goes a4, can white just grab this? Take it with your pawn, take it with the rook. And to me, it just looks like an extra pawn, Robert.
It is an extra pawn, but at least the queen on b8 will stare down an open line. The rook on c8 is on a fully open file. So this is what Jose is relying on. Whether it's going to pan out for him is a different question, but at least he is giving himself a clearer plan because the path in front of his pieces has now opened up. So this pawn can and is captured. This black queen can slide up to b3. There's rook c2 potentially to follow. In fact, I didn't even draw the blue arrow. That was the engine telling us that he had to play queen b3. It's given an exclamation point. It also was the point of his pawn sacrifice in this manner. So, David, I think that black, we can see clear counterplay, but is it enough? Would you feel comfortable at all with the black pieces?
I never feel comfortable playing against Alireza Firouzja, especially with black. He's a beast when he has white. He's beaten me in some of the biggest games of my career when he has the white pieces. But yeah, I think actually Jose, he's done the best of a bad job, of a bad position at least. He's kind of chosen the lesser evil, being a pawn down. I think he's just playing, kind of hustling here a bit, but he's doing the right thing. You have to play for that activity. You cannot just suffer passively and let your opponents slowly at will at their own discretion outplay you. So yeah, he's done a good job. At least the clock situation, which I was a bit worried about, it's kind of turned in his favor suddenly due to this active play. And against Firouzja, you have to fight fire with fire, or Firouzja with Firouzja. And yeah, I think he's doing a good job here. But talking of being a pawn down, maybe we zoom out to the other game just for a quick update while Firouzja takes a longer think. Because it's also a pawn down situation for Fedoseev, and that is bad news. Not just in terms of the fact that Nepomniachtchi is objectively better, but white only needs a draw. And Nepomniachtchi here with an A extra pawn, it should be in the bag, Tanya.
Yeah. I mean, this endgame just looks like, again, it's all white's play. Black is trying to target the f5 pawn. Fedoseev trying to attack both the a5 and the f5 pawn, but f6 is weak. For Jan, he can actually go ahead and pick up one more pawn. And the thing is, Fedosiev needs a win in this position. A draw is just not enough. Even if he manages to survive a pawn down, he is out of the Chessable Masters. Where is he going to create his winning chances here? Robert, how do you see that even being a possibility, a hope here?
You have to rely on your d-pawn, I guess. I know the answer to the question is, realistically, Jan is not going to lose this game. But if it's going to come from anywhere for Fedosiev, he does have a pass pawn that can't easily march on the board. His rook on b5 hits the f5 pawn, hits that a5 pawn, as you mentioned. So white does have a few things to figure out. But I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, why can't white just continue snacking on pawns and trading off more pieces, because there aren't so many pawns remaining in this position. I don't see winning chances for black. I'm trying to come up with something, but even this, the advantage is given away, but black needs to win, not draw.
So tough here. Fedosiev, 3 minutes on the clock. And as we were saying, it's just a tough position. He does go passive with the black bishop to defend, but look at this, really classy endgame play. Really beautiful move there. I saw your reaction, Robert. Just locking black's pawns on dark squares. That is a fixed target now. It's not running away anytime soon, that black pawn. The white bishop can slide at will back to pick it off, and then white's h-pawn becomes a real monster. Maybe a potential future queen there. Exclamation mark for good reason, Robert.
That's a lovely move. Yeah, you are just cementing that pawn in place, fixing it on the color that your bishop is on. So the black bishop is a passive piece. It's defending these loose pawns in the position. Sorry, that's the third loose pawn. And white fixes that pawn on h6. Lovely decision. Now, I'm not really worried at all for Jan Nepomniachtchi. It does seem like he's just a few moves away from winning. So why don't we maybe head back to our other game where there is a little bit more tension and drama, because it's half to half. They drew their first game, and in game two between Alireza and Jose Martinez, look at the position now. Jose, he's trying to occupy the b file, go after white's extra pawn. It's not like white has the clearest plan in the world. It is black to move. But, David, why can't you just grab this pawn on b2 now?
I don't see any reason not to. A pawn is a pawn. As you mentioned earlier, in another game, I hate being pawns down for no reason, so why not restore the balance? That's one load off the mind. I guess white will either trade off or maybe even go active with the white queen, queen to c7, but then it becomes a bit more random. I don't see any exact specific threats for white. It looks nice and pretty, kind of lined up on the 7th rank with the white queen and rook, but next, where do you go next? I don't see any reason to pause. I guess Jose doesn't need to rush. That pawn might be available next move. Really kind of tense position, but evaluation bar here, Tanya, I feel it's deceptive.
I'm looking at that extra pawn. To neutralize that, you have to pick it up. I really like the idea of keeping the queens and not trading it off. Queen to c7, the other move that comes to mind is even queen to c6. It can be really scary handling that. He is touching the 2.5 minute mark. Both players are under 3 minutes. Once the queen lands on the 6th or the 7th rank, there are big threats on the board. Queen c6 would threaten rook takes knight on d7. And he does go to capture the b2 pawn. And we see this. First question, how do you parry this big threat? I don't believe you can really move that knight anywhere, because if you do that, then there are ideas against the f7 pawn. If you were to go knight to c5 or knight to b6, then your move queen c7 really comes with a big double attack on that f7 pawn and also the rook.
But look at this. Passive defense. It's given a miss. That means the knight jump probably was better. But as you said, Tanya, very difficult to move the knight when the f7 pawn was in the rook's sights. But David, to your point from earlier, I don't see how white crashes through. You can make all sorts of little improving moves. King h2 is a nice one, making sure there's no check on the first rank over here. But let's say black gets passive. Queen to b8. I'm going to try to play rook c8 to kick your queen out of there, or try to trade queens. So, David, where are the inroads from Alireza's perspective? He's got more space, he's got more control, but you need to actually target and take something at some point.
It's not going to be easy. I still think from a human point of view, both players probably assume white's slightly better, but they won't assume it's a big advantage. And Robert, you mentioned the weaknesses. There aren't many actually in black's camp. It must just be the d6 pawn. And that is a backward pawn. It's only defended by black's passive bishop. Someday, eventually, it might take time. White's knight is going to come back via d2 over to c4 just to sit and pressure that pawn for good. First, there's a hit on the white queen. So the white queen needs to move. Where do you retreat her? I don't know if you can step forward. Queen to c7 now might just run into a hit with moves like rook to d7. If you step back, queen to a4, queen to c4, I think you just need to maneuver and improve. I want to praise Firouzja's king to h2 move, though. That shows he's played a bunch of blitz and bullet in his life. You never want to allow a check when your clock is ticking down. But yeah, it's going to be a long, long grind. It's going to take a while to maneuver and only then start to set up the tactics for white.
David, Alireza doesn't step back. What are the chances of him going queen to a8? The move looks crazy. And maybe it's too much because you're lining your queen against the rook, but I don't see an immediate big knight jump. Queen a8, is that a possibility?
Wow, I was not looking in that direction at all, David. I know you. You're like, wait, that's a legal square to go to? Yeah, no, that's a really cool move. I think Black may be forced to bring the rook up. Well, now definitely rook d7, but even after queen 8, bringing the rook to the 7th rank, this queen on b2, it's really doing excellent work covering so many squares and pieces. But now that the rooks are getting traded off, and okay, this is Black's only move according to the engines, but it also is very natural, and replacing the rook with the knight afterwards. Once again, I keep asking this question mainly to myself, but also out loud. How is white going to make progress from there? The d6 pawn is not easy to get to, especially because e4 and f2 and white's camp need to be defended.
We saw a shake of the head as well from Jose Martinez before he traded off those rooks. But if I were him, I would be breathing a sigh of relief. He essentially traded off his own bad rook for white's very strong rook. It must just be based on a very direct attempt at victory here for Firouzja. He's going in for the kill with the white knight, but the white knight is not jumping any further. There is a check, you can check, but the black king just moves. And look at this, the blue arrow. The computer says white's best move is to admit defeat and go back. Just admit that your last move was mistaken. And there's simply a hit on your e4 pawn, so he might have to find this, Robert. Is it just me, or is momentum changing? Things are turning on board and clock.
Momentum is changing. So it is in the other board. I'm going to have to quickly bring up this one. I cannot believe what I'm seeing over here. Fedoseev is winning because checkmate in 1 is threatened. White stole the h-pawn. Now that's the good news. But black has this d-pawn that is quicker, and checkmate in 1 is threatened. I'm in just utter disbelief. How in the world did this go wrong for Jan Nepomniachtchi? He can't believe it. Fedoseev wins. Tanya, what?
Whoa! Jan Nepomniachtchi resigns. Fedoseev wins the game, comes back in the match, takes it into Armageddon, a game that we had written off as one that Jan Nepomniachtchi can never lose. Rook to g3 check would have been a massive one, forcing king to h4. And how do you fight it? Because you're not only fighting this check, you're fighting the d pawn as well. d3, d2, d1 is just queening. You can't do anything about it. And he just gives up. And Jan with a shake of his head, he can't believe it either, David.
And I just went back to check. 2 moves ago, Jan was still winning. It was self-inflicted. He pushed his own pawn to f4. He blocked in his own bishop. He pretty much trapped his own white king. Yeah, we're showing this now, Robert, as we see Jan kind of smiling and kind of laughing at what he did. Pawn to f4, question mark. He's trapped his own king, walked into a mating net, and after the next move, rook to e3, brilliant find from Fedoseev. He didn't realize until it was too late. Nepomniachtchi taking that pawn on h6, and after bishop to e1, as Robert points out, rook g3 is a killer threat. The pawn is rolling. Game over. It went from winning to losing in 2 moves. Chess is brutal. Rapid chess is so unforgiving.
What a finish to that game. And I think when you're much better for most of the game, your opponent's just kind of flailing and doing random things, you just assume that nothing's going to work. But Fedoseev never stopped calculating. He's kind of like the Undertaker. He's coming back from the dead against Magnus Carlsen and now against Jan Nepomniachtchi. And as we dive back into this game between Firouzja and Jose Martinez, well, the same problems persist for black. There's this d6 pawn that's targeted a number of times. But I just don't think white has enough firepower to keep attacking it. Tanya, look at the clock. Jose down now under 13 seconds.
Wow, he's touching that 10-second mark. He makes the move. He can only shuffle around with the king and stay passive. Keep those pawns defended. There isn't much activity to fight for, but he's taking control of white's king squares, not allowing white's king an entry point, trying to trade off as many pawns as possible. And both players playing on seconds right now. It's still, where is the winning chance? Is white going to march all the way from the queen side over with his king, David?
Quite possibly. I think the simple plan now is there is a threat. Knight to b5. He's defended his central pawns with the white king, and the other 3 of his army are going to go for that backward pawn, the black d6 pawn. But Jose is fighting so tenaciously. He's trying to use his own knight to go for the white king, some checks, some hits on the white pawns. But look at this, all of white's pieces. This is the picture of teamwork. 3 of them ganging up on one sole weakness. Missed opportunity, apparently, according to the computer, but looks very logical to me. And again, the white king defending, the rest of the pieces attacking.
Wow.
And a piece sacrifice. Desperation from Joseph here. He's going to get 2 white pawns, but white's going to be left with 1 key remaining pawn. This one's over, Robert.
Yes, this was a nice retreating move as well from Firouzja. He secured extra material. Now he stopped his knight from coming to f4. It goes there anyway, but this is a winning endgame at this stage for white. d5 is gone. You can't actually defend the pawn. h4 comes next. And as long as you keep your last pawn, do not allow this to get 2 knights and a king versus a bare king, because that is the draw. In fact, Firouzja wins by resignation because he knows that Jose is not going to get that h3 pawn. Firouzja, he survives. Jose Martinez, his time in the Chessable Masters is done.
But what a run he had, but it does come to an end. Jose Martinez is eliminated from the Chessable Masters. Alireza Firouzja continues his run. I've got to say that last position and that game too, he did